Welcome back to Invictus Forum. And this time we are going to take synopsis of the chapters, chapter by chapter summary to help you have an idea about the plot of the novel. And I hope in the first video I gave a rundown summary of the important issues that have been raised in the text. Now let's begin with chapter 1. The setting is in an imaginary republic called Wanetemu. There is general poverty and people go back early to their homes, but the narrator sits behind to get another drink. In his drinking spree, he retrospects about Reverend Rothberger, who had once come to the bar with a prostitute, and we begin to ask who Reverend Rothberger is. Here there's an element of suspense, and if he is a reverend and the right one indeed, we'll wonder what a reverend will be doing with a prostitute. The district administrator also comes to the bar with his team to share fuel money, which indeed is money gotten from bribe. The narrator believes that children should be taught to fend for themselves. A young flowerball seller is knocked down by a bike rider who is forced to pay for all the balls and money for consultation. The inspector of police, who had watched the whole incident, forces the bike rider to give him bribe also before leaving. We are told that at the end of this scene, the young girl picks up her balls, wipes them, and puts them back into a bucket and continues with the sale. The narrator captivates the laws advanced by society to protect children's rights, yet parents watch immoral movies with their children in their sitting rooms. He also retrospects about an occultist who had lured a 10-year-old granite seller into his hotel pretending to buy granites and ends up raping her. Although the culprit is arrested and threatened with a severe punishment, he bribes the state prosecutor and the case dies a natural death because he gives 5 million francs bribe. The family is coerced with a meager 100,000 francs to forget about the case, and they are just too happy to receive such an amount of money which they have never seen at one go in their lives. He also retrospects about Bala, who had gotten himself into some problems with the authorities and had backed out afraid of spending the rest of his life in prison. The speaker also castigates prophets who claim to perform miracles, yet Pastor Louis cannot discover the whereabouts of Jones, who had been taken away by marine spirits. Ironically, it is a soothsayer who had found the corpse still looking very fresh, while the prophet claims that the people lack spiritual understanding of what he had said to them. He also comments on the national team, which has become an avenue for gross corruption, incompetence, and people impose their relatives to be selected to play for the national team while the good talents are sidelined. There is also anarchy in the governance of football in the country. Money that had been contributed for the national team by the population had disappeared in transit, and the players of old used to play out of patriotism, not for fame or money. He remembers how a foreign coach, Valery Nepomniachtchi, had carried the national team to the quarterfinals of the World Cup. But despite much money being spent on the national team nowadays, the team cannot perform even half of what the older players had done before, with very little money. The narrator also retrospects about the two Kwafia men who had been arrested at the airport, at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. But they pretend to speak only in Bembe, making the policemen on patrol to believe that they are fools and letting them go. He also criticizes Kai, who threatens citizens for the use of fake news, yet he published unverified information about the death of a president of a superpower country and claimed that error is human. The narrator also castigates Bobby, who was in charge of electricity, yet he will skip opposition areas. Ironically, his daughter gets married in one of the neglected neighborhoods, sleeping in darkness. In order to visit his daughter, he begs a lamp to park his car and returns to find the tire punctured. The narrator also speaks about a member of parliament who owns a lot of cars. He is always in the company of women on whom he splashes money, and he loves free money and hardly spends on others. Those who work at the port authority seize goods from merchants and want to cheat at all costs. Those who graduate from the Wanetemu School of Administration and Legal Studies collect bribe and build mansions while the masses wallow in poverty. His criticism does not spare individuals, especially medical doctors, who, for the least illness, they are very incompetent. And they are incompetent to operate patients, and many of them die. Their prescriptions are very expensive and lengthy, and this cannot be afforded by the common people. He also criticizes hypocrisy through Muslims who claim not to take alcohol, yet they drink Coca Alaji, which is a combination of Coca-Cola and a strong alcohol. Although Ntuntu is very patient when he drinks at his bar, he inflates the narrator's bill. Lastly, he castigates men of God who exploit the naivety of their Christians, especially women, and rob them of their hard-earned money. The critic is finally revealed as a village drunk called Bima, a talkative womanizer who is believed to be suffering from a generalized curse inherited from his grandparents. Akwe sends him to school, but he does not cope with his studies due to his wayward behavior, despite being sent to a prestigious school, and he drops out of school. He insults Akwe everywhere he goes and joins the camps of his enemy. He wants to destroy his benefactor through marabouts and accuses him of not paying his tuition. He threatens members of his family and purports that Akwe ought to pay him for the service that he had rendered to him. Akwe had actually given him money to start a business, which he had squandered. Akwe had made a prayer which had provoked the generational curse, pushing him to lecture to a non-existent audience whenever he gets drunk in off licenses. Bima returns early in the morning to wake up his wife, Mbanko, and his son to watch him eat. They had been married through an arranged union by their parents. He does not provide food money for his family and doubts the paternity of his children because he is hardly at home. In Kefu, from Jeafia, a village beauty falls in love with the village Casanova Eyepe, who is also in love with Ejebu. Ejebu gets heavily indebted to sustain their love, and Eyepe borrows money from Kefu and settles Ejebu's debts. Unfortunately, Kefu had given him the money to come and pay her bride price. He cannot marry in Kefu without answering from Ejebu, and so he decides to abandon the two women and goes to Nigeria, leaving Kefu and her parents in shame. Bima gets up at 10 in the morning to watch the young men playing football and retrospects about his boyhood, the scarcity of meat, and the chapter ends with a scam to provide a cow for Vikanyi. The silent issues that have been raised in this chapter include religious immorality. We can see that although he is an ordained Reverend Father, Reverend Rod Berger, has so many mistresses, and he does not hide them, as he could be seen coming to the off-license with one of them to have a nice time. There is also institutionalized corruption through bribery. Many people bribe their way to get into the national team, and other people use their influence to get their children or their relatives to get into the national team. There is also religious hypocrisy, as people take the oath of celibacy, yet they get involved in sexual immorality. There is also discrimination, fueled by political aspiration and favoritism. Bobby, who is in charge of light, discriminates and gives lights only to areas which are favorable to the government, thereby leaving the areas which are opposing to the government to be in darkness. Ironically, his daughter gets married to one of these quarters, which is actually in darkness. There is also moral indecency, and there is ingratitude. Ingratitude from Bimai, whom knows despite the fact that he is not related to Akbe in any way. But Akbe had sent him to school and had had the good intention of making him become someone important in the society. Yet, because of his wayward behavior, he had not been able to cope. And despite the money that he had given him to start a business, he had also failed. And instead of thanking the young man for his generosity, he tries to pull him down in many other ways, but never succeed. And it is believed that a curse from Akbe had ignited a generational curse that had led him to drinking and talking absent-mindedly in off-licenses. There is also superstition in the society. And we should also note the element of generosity, which I've already explained above, and conflict. Conflict between Akbe and Bimai. Bimai talks about his benefactor negatively wherever he goes. He even threatens to bring him down through the use of sorcery, but he does not exist. He does not succeed. Lastly, there is communality, as the children share meat when playing football on the pitch. Nevertheless, we can also have other stylistic devices which have been used here, such as suspense. The narrator spends a long time to talk about the different things that go on in society, and we do not even know who the narrator is up to that point. Until somewhere almost the end of the chapter, that's when we are introduced that his name is Bimai. There is also irony. It is ironical that Bobby refuses electricity to some areas which he believes are controlled by the opposition, only for his daughter to be married in one of such neighborhoods. And to go there, to visit his daughter, he has to beg for a lamp. And when he comes back, sometimes he finds his tires punctured. Generally, the retrospections and the accounts of what Bimai gives to us in this chapter is actually to satirize the ills of society, which have been mentioned above. Stay tuned as we continue to go to chapter 2. Stay blessed.